All right, we are live.
Hey everybody, welcome to
Hello.
the very first Code and Hustle Google Hangouts. This is going to be a talk. We're going to have a conversation about our product storyboard. We're going to talk about some workflow. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks, things that we do in our personal workflow that I think can help you. And we definitely want to hear from you. So if you have any questions about using Storyboard, about implementing it in your workflow, please use the Google Hangouts question function, and we'll certainly do that. We're also going to be heading to Twitter to talk about your questions too. So if you have some questions, please drop them on our Twitter at Code and Hustle, and let's begin. All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can throw down a tweet too to ask our followers if they have any questions. They can just tweet those to us. And yeah, and then we'll get started here in about 2 minutes. So this is totally an experiment for us. It's our first time trying these live on-air Hangouts. So please bear with us if it's rocky and there's any technical difficulties. It's kind of a cool platform and something that I think we're going to try to work into the future and do some cool stuff. So hopefully this one's a success, but really for us, this is just to test the waters and see how things go. So yeah, I think to start out, we're going to do a screencast here. So we'll get Photoshop running with Storyboard. And oh, we got 3 viewers. Awesome.
Welcome to the chat.
Yeah, say hello.
Sean, maybe just for a quick second here, we'll just kind of introduce who we are.
Okay.
I think it's important to note here that Sean and I are the guys behind Code and Hustle. We're the main developers, main guys behind the tech support, and so we're coming to you live, kind of direct from the source. We started about 5 years ago with Storyboard, and we've grown the company with Batch Plus, and we have some new stuff in the pipeline, so that's really exciting. We both reside on the east coast of Canada. I myself am in Nova Scotia. Sean is in St. John, New Brunswick. So we're a Canadian outfit. Shout out to all Canadian photographers who would be watching today. Just to give you a quick overview, we're going to go over some topics of Storyboard 3.0, which is our newest version of Storyboard. We're going to talk about configuring it. We're going to talk about using it, tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff. So like Sean just mentioned, this is our first Google Hangout that's live. So please bear with us with any, rocky tech issues or something like that. If anything creeps up, let us know, please, on Twitter or here in Google Hangouts. And yeah, this is our first one. So let's get started.
All right. So I just need to figure out one thing, that when I do a screencast, how to make sure that that's what is getting recorded and what everyone else can see. So I'm going to start doing a screen share. Okay, present to everyone. All right, so Dave, I'm assuming you can see my screen.
I think we're getting kind of a buffering, about to see your screen window.
Okay.
Nothing yet.
Okay. Let me try it again.
There we go.
All right. Great. So hopefully everyone else can see. If you can't see, if you're watching and you cannot see a screen, just let us know in the comments or yell at us on Twitter, whatever you got to do to let us know.
So Sean, I think maybe a first thing we can kind of demonstrate with Storyboard 3.0 here would be maybe after installation. Installation is very simple. It's basically drag and drop into the Photoshop scripts folder. The very first thing you're going to want to do is configure Storyboard, right? You want to set this up so that it, kind of meshes perfectly with your blog and your website. So can you show us that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in Photoshop right now. I'm in Photoshop CC 2014. But Storyboard is compatible with pretty much every recent version of Photoshop from CS4 onward. But I'm just using the most recent. So This is the storyboard configuration, how you see it when you launch Storyboard for the first time. So everything's kind of unchecked. We're going to go through the different tabs here, all the different settings, and I'll sort of explain what's what.
Hey, Sean, we just got some user feedback that on YouTube stream, people can't see the screen.
Okay. How do I fix that?
That's with the YouTube stream.
Okay. Let me see. No, that's what I want. Cameraman, broadcast. I wonder if it's, no, it wouldn't be delayed.
Hi, Candace.
Oh, hey, Candace. Was she the one who let us know?
Two people, actually. A good friend of mine, but
Okay.
Candace is also mentioning this too. So
Okay. What are they seeing?
okay.
Okay, I think I might have figured it out. See if they see it now. All right. We need one of those please stand by little messages.
Apparently, people are seeing just my video feed, and Candace mentioned the same thing. So,
Okay. Hide from broadcast. All right. I'm not sure. Broadcast the large video screen that I see to my audience and hide the other video feeds.
okay, Candace is saying she's seeing it now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe there's a little bit of delay. Maybe it's
There's a little bit of Google Hangout inception going on there.
yeah. Whoa. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to assume that people can see this. Again, just let us know if you're not seeing a Photoshop window in a desktop. If you're seeing Dave.
Consider yourself lucky.
Okay. Move my coffee out of the way so I don't knock that over. So yeah, so this is the storyboard configuration as you first set it up. So the first tab is kind of all your main settings that you're probably going to want to play with the most. The first section on this tab is the speed settings. So we put these front and center because these are the options that are going to let you use Storyboard the fastest and really speed up your workflow. Starting out, you may not want to enable them until you get a bit familiar with Storyboard and some of the concepts, but definitely as you get familiar, you definitely want to look at these and tweak them as you see fit. And as a little tip, you can hover over each one of these with your mouse and you get a little description of what they do exactly. So I'll go through them real quick here. So
Sean, sorry, how would I get to the configuration again? Just one more time.
Oh yeah. So now that you can see my screen. So there's two ways. You can go to File, Scripts, Storyboard Configuration. That's the main way. The other way is Storyboard comes with, well, it doesn't come with, but we do have actions available on our knowledge base site, helper actions that basically they just launch those scripts from the actions palette. So I have them over here in my actions palette, and I can just click configure Storyboard to bring this window right up.
So that's even faster than manually navigating to the Photoshop file menu. It's perfect.
Yeah, that's the way that I do everything with Storyboard is through the actions. And if you don't have the actions, they're pretty easy to set up. If you've ever made an action, you just start recording a new action, and then you go File, Scripts, and then select any menu item, then stop recording your action, and then you have a one-click option to bring that window up.
Cool. I think it's important to note, though, that we have those included for free over at the Code and Hustle support site. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. Awesome. So going through these speed settings real quick here. So ask every time to reorder images. Actually, having this unchecked will make your workflow faster. If you like to fine tune your storyboards every time you're building a row for your blog post, you want to leave this checked because it'll bring up the reorder window where you can change the order the images back and forth. We'll show this in a second. Continuously ask for files after each row is built. Now, this is a new option that's in a new update that's coming out. If you log into our site right now, you can download and get the update. Storyboard 3.1. This was based on feedback after our initial launch. And so this brings back the old loop mode from Storyboard 2. And what this does is that every time you build a storyboard, it's going to automatically ask you for images for the next one. Automatically diptych 2 vertical images when open together. So this is something that I always use, because if I'm opening 2 vertical images in Storyboard, chances are I want them side by side always.
Yeah, that's the same with my workflow too. I mean, 95 to 99% of the time, verticals are being put together as a diptych.
Yeah.
So this setting was put in here just for that purpose. I mean, it just speeds up the creation that much quicker.
Yeah, it's really handy if you're using the droplet too. I find, because like you just drop 2 verticals on the droplet and you've got them. Storyboard will just put them right together and save them out. Won't ask you anything. Always build a row when opening images. So this is another speed setting that if you're never compiling images together to create like a big composite with multiple rows in a single image, then having this is going to be a big time saver. Each one of these pretty much disables a prompt every time you select images in Storyboard. And then limit the maximum number of images per row. Again, this is something that I use and I put in based on how I use Storyboard. And because a lot of the times I'll be selecting 5, 6, like sometimes 10 images in a row that are going to be single images and not put in a row together. So if I open more than 3 images, Storyboard's automatically going to know that they're each going to go in their own row, and it's not going to bug me for what I want to do with those photos.
I think it's a good important note here that Storyboard, when you think about the product, you think about the diptychs and the triptychs and the multi-image rows, but Storyboard can also just simply resize single images. And settings like this can make that process very quick, and you will see that as we start building our very first kind of blog post.
Yeah, and you see some people when they first start using Storyboard, they kind of go a little bit overboard, and they've got all these images per row and these crazy mashed up composites. But I've found over time in looking at some of my favorite photographers' blogs that the best way seems to be to keep it simple, and it's a lot of single images on each row of the blog post, and then the occasional diptych, and sometimes like a triptych works for the right situation. Like say you have like an image sequence that shows maybe like a nice reaction or something like that. So yeah, I will never, like for me personally, I never put more than 3 images per row. And once you start getting larger than 3 images per row, the photos in that row start to get really small. And if they're important images anyway, like maybe they shouldn't be so small, they should be bigger anyway. So
right. So the reason why the images, if you try to cram multiple images into a single Storyboard image, they get so small because Storyboard is restricting those based on your blog width, right? So can you talk about setting up the blog width and those settings in the configuration?
Yeah, definitely. So this is where the appearance section is the next section, and this is based on your blog settings. I've noticed a lot of people when they're sending us like support requests and things like that, they keep it on the default settings here of 900 for a blog width and 6 pixels for the spacing. So some people I don't think they understand that they should go in and figure out how wide the main content column of their blog is, and find out that exactly and put that in here. Like for example, my blog is 930 pixels. So that's what we'll do for today. And I have my spacing in between my images on my blog set to 6 pixels. So I match that again in Storyboard. It's a bit tricky to figure out. And if you want to know more on how to figure that out and calculate that, feel free to shoot us a message, shoot us a tweet, message us on Facebook, and we can help get you sorted. And then your blog background color. My blog is white, so I just keep this. This is like a techie code sort of format for a color, but if you're not sure, you can go here and dial in your color.
So you can be very precise using the hex value.
Yeah, and depending on how you have your color picker set up, you can use the eyedropper. So like say your blog was this dark gray color of the Photoshop background, you can just use the eye picker to get your color, and then you'd be good to go. Right. You close that, so it sets it there. But,
so that's great for people who have sort of custom blogs or with a kind of a different theme or something with a different color setting. You can kind of match that background of your blog right within Storyboard.
Yep. I think a lot of people run either white or black, so it should be pretty
standard,
pretty easy. So my blog's white, so we'll keep it white. And then second, this is one of my favorite parts of Storyboard, because most of you know that when you resize an image, when you shrink it down, you should almost always be sharpening it. So this was probably one of the first features we added when we built Storyboard, was the ability to run an action on your storyboards before they're saved. And so for this case, I'm just going to run one of our Batch Plus utility actions, which is a Smart Sharpen for web. But use your favorite web sharpening actions here. It'll just make your storyboards look so much nicer when uploaded to your blog. And then, so lastly on this screen, before we move to the next tab, you've got your recipes. And if you run multiple blogs, so I can go in and I could save these current settings as a recipe so I can load them up. If you have multiple blogs, you can have a recipe for each one and jump back and forth between them. And we're going to move over to the saving tab. So this is all about where your files go and how big they're going to be file size wise. So the default here is 89 quality for save for web. Probably 85 is good. Ideally, you want your image size to be fairly low. You don't want your blog post to take forever to load for your visitors and your viewers. So keeping that down as low as you can get it without compromising quality is a good idea.
Just for the record, I think in my Storyboard recipe, I have my save for web quality at 70, which you think is kind of low, but when you see the images on my blog, they're very crisp and very clean, and there's like very minimal artifacting on the JPEGs there. So you can strike a balance between your file size and your overall quality, and you can play with that.
Yeah, I think Photoshop has gotten a lot better in the more recent versions. Like I remember when we built this first, Dave, it was CS3 is what we were building it on, and Save for Web I think has probably gone through a lot of improvements. So yeah, I would say 70 JPEG quality is probably more than fine for modern versions of Photoshop.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with a strong point. That is, Storyboard is dealing with and working in Photoshop, and we're using Adobe's, algorithms. We're using Photoshop's algorithms to resize your images and put these together. So they're basically being spit out of this app, at the best possible quality. And I think that's one of the hallmark features of Storyboard, is that you're using Photoshop to resize your images.
Yeah, it's the industry standard. So it makes sense to use that, and to some of our competitors, I guess, they're using third-party image processing engines that I don't think have the the quality associated with them and the history behind them that the Photoshop engine does. So yeah, I think that's a huge selling point for Storyboard. Okay, so just moving along, destination folder, that's where your storyboards end up. So the files that Storyboard creates are going to be saved into the destination folder. So I'm going to just set that up real quick. I've got a test folder on my desktop called for blog. So I'm just going to select that. So default file name. By by default, it's set to storyboard. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But you can, say you wanted to say, maybe it's a wedding or, like portrait. You can have it be whatever. You can also have storyboard every time you start it up, ask you what you want the file name to be. I don't use this because I use our SEO add-on now, which we're going to explain a little bit later.
And that takes care of the file naming for you.
Yeah, exactly. So that basically bypasses this feature. But for right now, I'll just put it on back to storyboard so we can see what's happening. And then I love this feature as well. Move original files to a subfolder after storyboarding. So what this does is, as you're building your blog post, you've got 60 images in a folder, and you're using those to load into Storyboard. As Storyboard uses them, it's going to temporarily save them to this subfolder so that when it asks you for photos again, you don't have to see the ones you've already used. Super, super, super handy.
So it's basically a way of kind of hiding the ones that have already been used.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, you've got to remember which ones you've already opened and, scroll through a big long list sometimes. So
yeah, and if you're blogging a wedding, there could be like very many images in that folder. So this kind of just only shows you the ones that are remaining to pick from. It's really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that feature. I always have that checked. And then you can add a watermark to your images. I'm not going to get into this right now, mainly because I don't use watermarking and I don't have one set up. But we have a video. I believe we have videos on our website that detail this in more detail. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of watermarking on my images and seeing images on blogs that are watermarked. But
for the record, either am I. I think this was kind of a thing that came up early in Storyboard 2, and people really wanted the watermarking feature. And this is totally a philosophical debate. You think you might want the watermark there for Pinterest, and depending on where your images go. I think a lot of people really kind of avoid the watermark because it detracts from your overall photography. It detracts from your style and your kind of vision. So the good thing here is that Storyboard gives you the option to use it if you want.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward to the settings. Like if you've used any sort of watermarking feature in the past, I think a lot of these concepts will be the same. So yeah, if you watermark your images, definitely check this out. Lots of options in there. You should be able to configure it to do any sort of watermarking scenario that you want. But for the purpose of this broadcast, I think we'll just skip that for now. And okay, so moving on, the last tab is for advanced settings. So a lot of people get in here and they start changing things, and I don't think they fully understand what each option does under the advanced settings. And so we added this warning recently that just, proceed with caution when changing these. But I'll try to go through them really fast.
I think it's important to note that this is not going to break Storyboard, but it might not behave the way you expect it if you change some of these settings.
Yeah, definitely. If you're unsure, chances are you want to leave all of these to the default, with one exception. So ask to unarchive images once finished storyboarding. So that feature that I talked about where the folders or the files get moved to a subfolder as you're using them, this will ask you if you want to move them back when you're finished storyboarding. So yeah, I suggest having that turned on. So that way, when you're done preparing your blog post, your folder goes back to the way it was originally. Automatically merge all visible layers before running actions and saving. Chances are you want to leave this checked. If you have some crazy action that manipulates specific layers, again, it's a super power user setting. So chances are you want to leave this checked. Otherwise, if you're running any actions, it could cause unexpected results. Save files automatically once storyboarded. Unless you want to tweak a file, like have it storyboard, leave it open, you probably want to leave this checked. Unchecking it will slow things down greatly. So close files automatically after being saved sort of goes in line with the previous setting. Chances are you want to leave all 4 of these checked unless you have a really specific scenario to deal with otherwise. Some people like an Adobe RGB workflow. So if you use Adobe RGB all the way through your workflow, you probably want to check this option. Write copyright information. This is the only one that I would suggest maybe enabling. So checking that and then, putting in your name. So what that does is it just writes to the copyright metadata of the image as it's saved. And then if some people have crazy pattern backgrounds for their blog and they want to save their photos as PNGs, so we added this option, which will do a transparent spacing between images.
I think it's important to note with the PNG option, Sean, that that's going to create a much larger file size than the Save for Web JPEGs.
Yes.
So that may impact your performance or the way your blog post kind of loads because it's a bigger file. So it's definitely something to note.
Yep, absolutely. And images typically look better as JPEGs than PNGs. PNGs are great for graphics and things, but not as good at images. So again, don't enable that unless you need to have that transparent spacing between your photos. Build columns instead of rows for blogs that only scroll sideways. There's a few people out there that have horizontal scrolling blogs. So, instead of scrolling your browser window up and down, they scroll side to side. So checking this option will build storyboards almost in reverse order. So instead of putting images side by side, it puts them on top of one another.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of support tickets with that option, and some people think just leave that on by default. It gives them a more advanced output from Storyboard, but you only want to enable that if you have that horizontal scrolling blog.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then lastly, there's a few extra action options if you want to get into it. So if you want to run a specific action on compiled images, you can do so here. And then this is an interesting option that we sort of had from the beginning of Storyboard, but it was sort of tucked away in this weird file that you could edit. And to explain the difference, the typical action settings that I showed at the first of this broadcast is when you have, say you have a diptych, the diptychs get merged into a single file and then an action is run on that file. So that's how the typical action works. The way this one would work would be you have your diptych that has two images. Before they get merged, the action runs on each image individually. And the reason we added this was we had some users that wanted to do like a keyline frame around each image in a storyboard. So you can do that with this feature. We have one user, Jesse Hisco. He's a really awesome photographer from Australia, and we worked with him to get him set up to do rounded corners on each of his images, and he uses this feature for that. Definitely suggest checking out his website and seeing how he uses Storyboard. Really cool, really fits his brand. But yeah, so rounded corners on each image in the storyboard instead of just the single file. So, but most people probably won't use that. So that's why it's kind of tucked away.
So here's a question then, Sean. So we have the storyboard configuration. We have the three separate tabs, the general, the saving, and the advanced tab. So if I want to save a recipe, does the recipe encompass all of these settings?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
It will take into effect the advanced settings.
So I can jump back and forth recipes with very extreme kind of different settings if I need to.
Yeah, you could have one that does rounded corners for each image using this feature here, and yeah, even if it was just totally different workflows for blogging. If you had a horizontal scrolling blog and a vertical scrolling blog, yeah, your recipes will take care of all that.
Perfect. All right. So that's kind of an overview of the configuration, and that's the majority of all the settings that you're going to configure for your particular workflow and your blog. So why don't we kind of let's get Storyboard on the go and let's see the workflow in action.
Okay.
So with Storyboard 3, Sean, I think the important thing to note is that with the inception of Storyboard 3, there's kind of some new and different ways to actually go storyboard your images from start to finish. Originally with Storyboard 1 and Storyboard 2, you were kind of limited to Photoshop, kind of like this standard workflow, but there's kind of a new exciting way to do this. Can you explain the designer?
Yeah. So Designer is my favorite way to prepare a blog post for sure.
Also mine.
Yeah, and it kind of came out of nowhere, the idea for this feature, and it's been a huge success with Storyboard 3. And I think a lot of people are really enjoying it. It's a visual way to, design your blog post and get a bird's eye view of it all before you go through and, save all your storyboards. So let's take it for a spin. So it's under File, Scripts, Storyboard Designer, or if you have your action set up, there's just a Storyboard Designer, one click. And so the first time you run it, you're going to get these pop-ups that sort of guide you through the process. So the first step is to choose all of the images you want to be included in the blog post. And once you get the hang of things, you can click this little checkbox and it won't ask you again. So I'm just going to select my images. So I've got a bunch of test images here that I'm going to open up. I'm going to select them all.
So if I could just make a little note here, in my particular workflow, I'm in Lightroom, and I've already sort of tagged the images that I want to show from a certain wedding or a portrait shoot that I have. So I have had those exported to the desktop into a folder. So I know right away that the entire set of images are going to be included in this blog post. So I can just select them all and click go.
Yep. Yeah, and that's you could go through and sort of cherry pick your images from like a huge list, but to me that's crazy. It's much easier if you're using Lightroom or Photo Mechanic to sort of go through as you're going through each image and sort of flag the ones that you want to use. Save those as full res images. These are all full res. Yeah, these are all full res photos. Save them to a specific folder that you're going to use for blogging. And that way, when you're using Storyboard, you can just open it up, select every image, and then click open. So step 2 in the designer is going to be, it's just letting you know that you're going to build your layout in a web browser. And then I'm going to automatically perform this step in the future. So Storyboard goes and it has to do a little bit of preparation before it can open them in the web browser where they're high-res images. It's resizing them. If you wanted to avoid this, instead of using full-res photos for Designer, you could resize them to your blog width automatically. So when if you have a collection in Lightroom, you save those to a folder on disk at your blog width. So for me, it would be 930 pixels. So that will save things. It'll save a bit of time. It'll just save that step there where they were all resizing.
But it's still pretty quick.
Yeah, it's still pretty fast. But if you're doing a wedding, maybe that has, if you're blogging like 150 images or something crazy like that, it might take a bit. But so then step 3 pops up, and we're not going to do anything with step 3 yet. So there's some people get a little bit confused and they aren't sure what to do. But as you can see, so Safari opened in the background here for me. So the next step is to jump over to Safari. I'm going to build my layout here, and then I'm going to come back to Photoshop, and then I'm going to paste some code in here, and then click Build Storyboards.
That seems pretty simple. What about other browsers, Sean?
So there's a bug with Chrome right now on OS X, the most recent version of OS X. And so we have to default open it in Safari. And Internet Explorer is not the greatest for some of the drag and drop functionality that we use here in Designer. It uses modern browser features. So we highly suggest using Chrome or Safari. I mean, you can just copy this URL here and paste it into any other browser. Like I could paste it into Chrome and it would work. There's just a bug with automatically opening a file in Chrome. So that's why we have to default open it to Safari on OS X.
Okay, cool.
But for this purpose, I always just build it in Safari. I usually have a bunch of stuff on the go in Chrome. So yeah, so this is Storyboard Designer. So as you can see, it loaded up all of my images that I selected in chronological order here. And you've got you hover over a photo, you have some controls. I can delete an image, I can move it up and down. So that just dropped it down below the other image. The big thing though is drag and drop. So I can drag and reorder images, or I can drag and drop one image onto another and it will merge it automatically like that.
So I can actually just visually build things as I kind of want to present them right here in the browser.
Yep. So it's like what you see, like
What you see is what you get.
what you see is what you get, basically. And to really see things how they're going to show on your blog, I suggest going to view mode and changing it to preview, because that's going to set it to your blog width. So right now it'll match my blog width and blog background.
Oh, that's very intelligent that it matches it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it knows your blog settings, so it's going to make it look like this is exactly how it will look when I upload it to my blog. So you can really, really get a feel for it.
I noticed there was another view mode there. I think it was called small.
Yeah. So normal was what it defaults to, and then small is kind of like a zoomed out version. It's pretty cool. It's great if you need to move a photo like really far down the list.
Or if you have just like very many photos to blog, you can kind of see more that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm jumping back and forth between small and preview and normal all the time. So normal has all of your little controls though. So that's sort of the default, the default mode.
The normal operation.
Yeah, so you can go through and one of my favorite things to do is I do another call, so I'll call out a bunch of images at this step, even though I already think that they're going to make it to the blog post. But once I see them in order here, like for example, these two images are kind of similar, so I go through and maybe I'll remove that one and just stick with this one. And same type of thing, like, okay, I don't like this black and white, so I'll just call that out.
I noticed a huge kind of trend in tighter blogging experience with my photography business. Once I had the designer and I was able to visually see, what this was going to look like instead of manually building it in Photoshop, I got a lot more picky with my my images, and being able to just remove it at the point of kind of creation for me, I think ended up in me showing kind of a better overall blog post, a better curated piece of work. So I think selecting everything that you kind of want to show and then refining it down even further in the designer is a huge selling point of the designer itself.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm constantly calling images like at multiple stages in my workflow, like from the initial call when they come off of my memory cards to as I'm editing in Lightroom, I'm calling there as well. But yeah, when I get to this stage in Designer, I'm going through and I can see how things are going to look in the blog post, how it's going to flow. And if I don't like a particular image where it's sitting, like I can change the order. I can move it to a new spot or just kind of delete it altogether. Okay. So, yeah, it just, I feel like my blog posts are stronger in a sense. So I just want to go over a couple of these little features. So you'll notice like I hover over this, I can delete it, I can move it up, or I can move it down with these little arrows besides dragging and dropping.
What if I already dip-tipped images together, but I don't want them there anymore? I want to kind of separate them.
Right. So you'll notice this one, the diptych, we've got two extra options. So this one, that's the multiple line. So this will split them back into their original images. And then this one will sort of randomize the order of the photos. So, say maybe you have like 3 images there and say I want that horizontal in the center. I'll just click this a couple times till I get it. And then again, yeah, I don't really want to do that. I want to diptych these again like that, move this up here. So you can see it's really, really fast. So you can go through so fast and build your blog post. So there's some vertical images here that I want to, maybe I'll do these 2 here. And I'll diptych these 2 together. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just, so if I click the X here, this is going to remove both these photos. So there we go. These 2 photos are kind of similar. So, just again, like calling. Calling's probably the most common thing that I do in Storyboard Designer. And yeah, I kind of like this sort of like this photo here. Might be best suited for the end of the blog post. So throw that down there. These 2 are pretty similar. So, this is how I would blog normally. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna remove this image too. So there we go. So a few other cool features. So you can say you delete an image by accident. You can go up here to actions and undo last delete, or you can restore all images that you deleted. So maybe you want to get an image back and put that somewhere. You can use these features here. Another fun feature that I use a lot too is the sorting option. So you can sort by file name. You can sort by capture time. Super handy if you're loading in images that were shot on different cameras or by different photographers, and maybe the timestamps are off a little bit. The file names are off a little bit. So this will sync them up in chronological order. You can reverse the order, but sometimes what I do for portrait sessions, where the order doesn't matter so much, is I'll go here and I'll sort things randomly. So that way, you've got images, like a different part of the session is kind of, it's next to a totally different part of the session. And it kind of gives a nice flow sometimes. So, well, I'm going to leave it like that for right now. So say we're done our blog post, I'm going to click finish. So you get this code here that you can just, right click and copy. And this is where we're going to go back to Photoshop. And you just paste in that code and then click build storyboards. And so storyboard is going to go through. It's going to resize everything. You'll see it here in a second. Once it gets to a diptych, so it's going to open these two images, put them together. So it's all saving these out to the location of my choice that I specified in the configuration.
Yeah, so even though this is the designer and it's in the browser, it's still pulling the settings from the configuration. So if you're running actions, certain sharpening actions or whatever, like it's still using those settings, correct?
Yeah. So these are all getting sharpened. It's kind of going a little too quick. You can't see it happening, but yeah, it's running my sharpening action. It's resizing them, combining them, combining the diptychs that I have specified. And yeah, so it's using all of your settings in the configuration.
So when this is finished, what do I do next? Like I want to put this on my website. What do we do with the rows, I guess? We had some confusion in the past over the concept of rows and what to do with them.
Right. So here's my output folder, my save location, destination location, I think it's called. So you can see I've got 21 images here. If you see the dimensions down here, they're all going to be perfectly sized, 930 pixels. And let me just bring a few of these up. So yeah, so the diptychs, they've got my spacing in between, and they're all ordered in the order that I had them in Designer. So it's really, really quick. I find Designer is probably the fastest way to blog images using Storyboard, for me anyway, because I can just quickly go through, a lot of the times I'm just clicking random, getting them in an order that I think looks good, weeding out any ones that I don't want, and then I'm clicking over to let Storyboard do its thing. So it's probably one of my favorite features of Designer. It's just how fast it is. So I have these images, and yeah, so like David mentioned, sometimes there's confusion, and a lot of people think that Storyboard will create one image that you upload to your blog.
Like a giant sort of collage, I guess.
Yeah, so like this, imagine all of these 21 photos merged into a single JPEG that would be, like 3 megabytes in size and, thousands of pixels tall. And that's not the case, and it's not efficient, and we don't recommend doing it that way.
What are the disadvantages of doing it that way?
So for one, it's going to be one huge file that your browser has to download. Think of people on like mobile phones,
iPads, things like that.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to load. Depending on your blog, it could cause issues with resizing. Like we've had some people email us where, they have this huge, long, skinny image that's causing, it's resizing to a weird size on their blog because their blog basically doesn't know what to do with an image that size.
That large, right?
And there's SEO. We're going to get into SEO here in a little bit, but there's a bunch of SEO advantages too to having multiple images that
multiple separate images. Yeah.
Yeah, and So a browser, when it connects to a web page, it can download and open up multiple images in parallel. So this will help your blog load faster. Instead of having just to download one big file, it will, it'll download a few at a time and speed things up too.
Great.
So, so it's built, each row is its own image. It's the best way, I can explain it, and sort of how we've tried to explain it to people.
I think it's important to note here, let's just use two major providers. Let's say Squarespace, for example, as a blogging platform, and WordPress. And I know back in the day, and likely still now, a lot of photographers would use, say, the Pro Photo theme for their wedding or their portrait blog, and that's a very customizable theme. And often you would go in and you would specify, I want to show my images at 800 pixels wide. I want to have a spacing of 6 pixels, horizontally between the images. And all you need to do in this case is just upload these multiple rows, these multiple JPEGs in sequence, and you have that perfect visual, justified, great looking blog post from top to bottom. And it's just kind of done perfectly for you. And, both Squarespace and WordPress have settings that allow you to kind of specify, the spacing and the width and that kind of stuff. So you just need to upload and you're good to go.
Yeah, definitely. So just, as an example, so if I go to my blog, I'll just kind of show you this is like another advantage. So here's this blog post when I actually did it. So, each sort of image is its own thing. And I have it's great for Pinterest, so you can pin like individual images. So I guess that would be like another advantage.
If I have one large, massive collage, like you're losing kind of potential on Pinterest, because you could have multiple images on Pinterest instead of just the one singular.
Yeah, and it won't show right on Pinterest either. It'll resize all weird, and the thumbnail won't make sense. So yeah, definitely, definitely upload multiple single row images, or multiple rows images per. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but a little tongue-tied. Yeah, just upload multiple smaller images instead of like one large image. So it's gonna pop out. Have we got any questions yet?
No questions yet.
No.
Nothing on Twitter or Facebook. So let's keep trucking. We have 10 to 4 now. So
okay. Yep. All right. So yeah, feel free to post in any questions, and we will answer them for you. You're keeping an eye on those, Dave?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. So that was Designer. So we'll cover really quickly the standard way to build Storyboard. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to delete these photos because we'll basically do this again.
Actually, Candace asked the question, but we're gonna kind of get into the answer to that very shortly here, and it's regarding alt tags in WordPress. So
okay, you know what? Just to speed things along here, I'm going to go into Storyboard configuration, and we're going to demo. We'll demo our two add-ons right now. So search engine optimization, so our SEO add-on, and advanced cropping. So we'll demonstrate those in the standard Storyboard workflow. Okay.
And that way we can kind of see both the standard Storyboard workflow and how these add-ons work.
Yeah. So, and one thing to note is the SEO. The SEO works with it works with the designer as well. So, so I'm just going to click Save, and I'm just going to launch Storyboard as normal. So File, Scripts, Storyboard. Now, what this does, it's Storyboard asking me for images that I want to basically resize or storyboard or prepare for my blog. So I've got these little thumbnails. One annoying thing on Mac OS is that you can't control how big these thumbnails are, no matter how hard you try. But a cool little tip is you can hit spacebar to bring up the quick look on these. So if you need to see them bigger, you can just hit the spacebar. But okay, so with this style of storyboard, you're really going to be building your blog post row by row. So you want to think, okay, what images do I want in the next row? So I want these two vertical images as a diptych. So I'm just going to select those two, click Open. And so there you go. So Storyboard, put them together. And now this is the SEO add-on kicking in here. And you have, it asks you for an SEO friendly description. So it's going to do two things. So, I'm just going to put like couple portrait on the beach. And what this is going to do, so this is going to set the caption metadata in the file to this wording. And it's also going to rename the file. So in the last example, all the images were like a number dash storyboard. So this one, for example, this will save as 01 couple dash portrait dash on dash the dash beach.jpg. And I'll show you that as soon as I build this. And then you have some options down here where you can set this description for just the next image, so this image, or you can bulk. So say you're going to be doing a bunch of images, you want them all to have this couple portrait on the beach. So you can select, 10. I often use 10 images at a time, like if I'm doing a wedding, because I'll do like 10 with one keyword set, and then I'll do 10 with another keyword set.
Yeah, there's a bit of a Google SEO strategy happening there. You kind of want to mix things up a little bit instead of just keeping the exact same file name for the entire blog post, correct?
Yeah, you don't want a ton of images all named and labeled the same thing. It's good to mix it up, and I like to keep my max around 10. So I'll only use like one SEO description, like maximum 10 times.
And I think it's an important note here. If you want to get the max results from the SEO add-on, if you kind of sit down and completely describe your images on a one-to-one level, like each particular image, you're going to get the best SEO results that way. Yeah. It's just a little more time consuming that way. So you can kind of chunk them using that, that setting at the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, the flexibility is there. If people want to do this, like for every image, get really, really specific. Me personally, there's kind of like a fine line between getting really detailed and then like spending a bunch of time.
Right. So there's a trade-off there in terms of your own personal time and what Google's going to do for you.
Yeah. So, there's certain images that, I'll sort of cherry pick and do a specific description for, but then a lot of the images, like for a wedding blog post, like I said, I'll just batch them like 10 at a time.
So Candace, just to answer your question, do we change the alt tags in WordPress? No, with us, if we use the SEO add-on, it's actually going to do that for us automatically. So when we upload these storyboard images to WordPress, that's already taken care of. Yeah.
So I'll save this image out. So I'm going to just set the description. Before I continue, we'll go. Ooh, that window scares me there. So here's the photo that it saved out, Candace. And you see it's named properly. So I'm just going to do a test upload, and I'll upload that to WordPress. So I'll just to show you what happens. And now, if you have certain plugins enabled in WordPress, it could change this behavior, but I found the default WordPress behavior, it works perfect for this. So, I'll just do like test post, and then I'm going to click add media, upload files, and I'm going to select that that image that I just created. So open that. So, okay. So this causes a little bit of confusion. We've had some feedback about this, but if you look here in WordPress, it has like the title and the alt text is blank. But if I do insert this into post, even though the alt text is blank, you'll notice here, so it's hard to tell if you're in visual mode, but if you click on the text mode to see the actual HTML that it generates, so the alt tag is there, and that's what we entered in the SEO add-on. So it does work, even though it looks like it's not going to work in the WordPress media gallery, it does in fact work. So I hope that answers your question, Candace. And if that doesn't work for you, like I said, it could be a plugin or something about your WordPress installation that might be causing things to act differently. So if that's the case, just let us know and we can have a look at that for you. Okay, So that was the first image. And so I'm going to go back. I want to hide this. So Storyboard will ask what I want to do next, and I'm going to click build another row because this blog post is going to have multiple rows. So say I want all of these images each on their own row. So I'm just going to select a bunch here. So I got 6 images, and I'm going to click open. And because of that setting that I explained at the very first in the speed settings, so I opened more than 3 images. So Storyboard knows that each one is going to be saved as its own, like on its own row. So it's going to go through these one at a time. So here we go. I can enter in a new SEO friendly description, or I can just double click on one of these previous ones. So I'm just going to double click. So, for this one, maybe I'll say like just a couple portrait description. So you just go through image by image of those ones that I selected, and I'm going to pick, a worthy description. So sunset engagement photo. How's that?
Sean, just as I'm watching you do this, I think it's kind of important to note that the SEO add-on does add a little bit of time to the overall workflow, but I think the benefits far outweigh that extra time. Because like the SEO benefits you're getting from this little bit of extra work. Like if you had to do this in a different way using some different apps like in the past or even now, it's going to be even slower than this. So you can kind of do this on the fly and be done very quickly with it.
Yeah. So one thing that, some feedback based on, some of our users, actually, I think it was the Nordica guys that suggested this feature, is this bulk add descriptions. So, I've got this blog post. It's all like sunsetty, beachy. So I can go in and enter a bunch of descriptions here right away, like, like beach, engagement photo, sunset portrait. So you just enter them as like separated by commas. So, you could basically preload all of the descriptions that you're going to use for this blog post here. I'm just going to do 2 for right now, but add those, and they show up in the list. So now every time an image pops up, I can just double click whichever one I want to use. So
that's amazing. If you like shoot weddings that say like similar venues.
Yeah. Or similar venues, similar destinations. You can just sort of go through all the combinations that you want to use for the blog post, bulk add them here. And then it's just a matter, there's no typing involved. It's clicking. So it's just, sunset engagement photo, pops it up. It's pretty fast. Couple portrait. It really speeds things up that way. So now if I pop back to Finder here, you'll see all of the different names that I selected. And it's naming them all in order sequentially. So when I upload them to my blog, they're all going to show in the proper order. And I'm going to build a few more rows here. So here's a fun little tip. So I'm going to select these 3 images, these 3 verticals, and I want to put these as a triptych. And I'm going to hold the Option key on my keyboard. Windows users, you'll hold the Alt key. So I'm going to hold that and then click Open. And so I get this window pop up. So the very first setting in the speed settings in the configuration, you can check it off, and it will always show this window when you open multiple images. I like to leave that unchecked, and when I know I want to reorder images, I just hold the Option or Alt key.
Yeah, it's even faster that way.
To bring this up. So this allows you to select an image, and then you can move it to the right, move it to the left. So for this example, I want the guy here in the middle. And now's a good time, I think, to show the cropping as well. So we have this feature called on-the-fly cropping. And so you can toggle this on and off for each image. I don't know if you see the little 1-to-1 ratio show up underneath that selected image. So I can toggle it for each of these.
Sean, what if I'm like a hybrid shooter and I have some film like images and I have some different formats, and I also shoot digital and I want to match those?
Right. So if you have the advanced cropping add-on enabled, you'll see this little box down here with the aspect ratio. So by default, the crop defaults to 1:1, but if you have the aspect rate or the advanced cropping add-on, you'll get this little drop-down option. So, you know, you think of like a lot of those Contax 645 shooters, you can match the ratio here. So, and I'm going to toggle all for cropping. So this will crop all of these at a 4.5:6 ratio, which would, you know, match like a medium format film scan.
But can I control where the crop goes in that case?
Yep. So we'll see that in a second. And you don't have to toggle them all. So you can, you know, you can disable the crop for that one or enable it. So let's leave it off of the center photo, and we'll just crop the ones on the side. It might look a little weird, but it's just a test, so we'll we'll go with that.
It's experimental.
Yep. So I'm going to click done, and here we go. So it opens up the first image, and it's giving me the option to crop here. So yeah, I can control the crop. Let me change my I've got my settings here. There we go. So yeah, so as you can see, I can control the crop however I want. You know, I can bring it right down if I want, zoom in. Oh.
So this is another kind of real advantage to using all full high-res images from Lightroom or Photo Mechanic. Bring in the highest quality and the largest aspect ratio you have, and use Storyboard to kind of do the resizing for you.
Yep. Yeah. So once you have your crop the way you want it, you can just hit enter, and it will crop it and save it, go to the next photo. So same thing here. You know, maybe I'll just pull this in just a little tighter. And hit enter.
Oh, that's neat. So it kept the proper aspect ratio of the middle image, but I also have the crops on the outer ones.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting look. And then so last step is you tag it for your SEO. So beach engagement photo. Okay, and then so say that was my entire blog post. I'm going to click on finished, and Storyboard says, do you want to move archived images back to their original folder? And I'm going to click yes. So that's going to put that folder back to the way it was when I started. And if I go have a look at the photos that Storyboard created, so there's that triptych that we just did. Let's get all the nice full width images and that diptych we did at the very first. So these are ready to go, ready to upload to my blog. If I'm using WordPress or Squarespace, it should pull in the alt text, and yeah, you get great SEO benefit from that.
You could see how after using the kind of standard Photoshop Storyboard workflow, how you could get very quick doing it that way. I mean, it's not as visual as the designer, but if you're really good with your keyboard and you kind of already have an idea in the back of your mind before you start storyboarding, you know, what this is going to look like, you can pound out a very kind of precise and you know, very put together blog post very quickly this way.
Yeah, so I guess that leaves just the droplet to showcase, and that should only take a second. So I'm just going to delete these photos.
So the droplet is Mac only. Yeah,
the droplet is for Mac only, and it's an optional paid add-on that you can buy. And I'll show you how I like to use that sometimes. I really like to use the droplet if I'm just doing like, if I want to save a triptych really quick for Facebook, or like a triptych or a diptych for Facebook. I use that, and I usually use it right from Lightroom or Photo Mechanic. For this example, I'm just going to open up Photo Mechanic, and oh, there's some pictures of my son.
He's a cute boy.
And I'm just going to load this. I'll load those same images up in Photo Mechanic. And so if you see my dock here, I don't know how well it's showing up on the broadcast, but so I have the Storyboard droplet in my dock. I have that. I always have it in my dock just for easy access, because you can drop photos right onto the dock icon. Alternatively, you can click it and you have this window where you can drop images right onto the window. And important thing is you want to make sure, oh, I think this is an older version. Oh, I hope this works. I did test it and it did work earlier, so we'll see how it goes. But you want to make sure you pick your version of Photoshop from this drop-down. So I've got CC selected. I'm hoping this works. The joys of doing things live.
But, we'll do it live.
Yeah. Okay, so the idea here is this is a great way if you're working in other apps. Like I spend a lot of my time in Photo Mechanic, and so I have these two images. If I want to diptyque these really quick, I'm just going to drag them onto the droplet. Oh, and it's working. Good. And there we go. So it automatically, it's putting those together on their own row. And it's asking me to tag them for SEO. So I'll just do couple portrait on the beach, double click. And yeah, okay. So it moved those into its own folder. So if you're going to be using the droplet, I highly recommend unchecking this setting here. Move original files to a subfolder after storyboarding, because it doesn't really make sense. You're keeping track in Photo Mechanic, or let's say Lightroom or whatever, which images you're storyboarding. So if you're using the droplet, you probably want to disable that feature. So I'm just going to.
I just want to mention there. That's a quick example of a recipe. Like if I know I'm going to go into a droplet type session where I'm going to be using the droplet specifically, I might cook up a recipe where I have that option unchecked. And if I know I'm not going to use the SEO pop-up, I'll uncheck that as well, save that into a recipe, and that way that's just completely just creating those storyboards as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And if you're just using the droplet too for like Facebook, which is kind of how I use it, I would even take that a step further, and I would change my blog size to something like higher res. Yeah, yes. Like I like to use 1800 pixels when I upload to Facebook, and then sharpen. So I might go in and create. Let's just do that just as an example, I guess. So I'm just going to go in. So 1800 pixels. Set that here. Maybe I don't want any spacing between the images if I'm uploading to Facebook. So I can go in here, and I've got that setting unchecked, and I'll save the current settings as a recipe and call this, Facebook droplet, and save. So that will show up here in the list for future. So if I go and change these settings, so if I set this back to 900, I want that back, I'll just go Facebook droplet and then load, and you see it changes right back. So I'm going to click save. And so back to Photo Mechanic. And so yeah, let's do like another diptyque here. Let's do these two photos. So just dragging these onto the droplet, it's going to open them up. And let's say, beach portrait. I guess I could have saved in my recipe too to disable the SEO, because SEO doesn't really make much sense if you're uploading to Facebook. So
that's what I said.
Oh, sorry. I was in the zone.
It's okay. I forgive you.
I was in the zone. Yeah. So, and if I go over to my folder where it's saving them, so there's that new one, nice and big, 1800 pixels. Just drag that onto Facebook, and away we go.
All right, that's really amazing, actually. So the droplet is Mac only. It's also important to note that the SEO add-on and the advanced cropping add-on are for Storyboard 3 only.
Yes.
Correct. And as is the designer. The designer is the newest feature of Storyboard, and that's in Storyboard 3.0. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just taking a look here to see what Candace is saying. So, okay, I'm using this SEO add-on, but it looks like it isn't saving that info as alt tags. We can talk about that later. So, Candace, I don't know if you're still watching or not, but so is it not saving in the file, or is it just not showing in WordPress? So I don't even know if is there a way to tell who's watching this? I don't know. So I'm gonna switch off the screen share for now. There we go. Because I think, are we done, Dave, with the screen share features?
Yeah, those are the main kind of touch points on Storyboard 3, with the designer, the standard Photoshop method, the droplet, uploading your images to your website. We kind of saw that in action. Now would be time to answer some questions if there was any.
Yeah, so
one thing I think it's kind of important to touch on, and it's kind of hard to get this across through like knowledge-based articles and that kind of like techie stuff, but it's just kind of the philosophy behind Storyboard. I know when we originally kind of started this concept, in this app or whatever you want to call it, this script, the number one factor was always speed. It was always the priority on doing this quickly. I know years ago, being on photographer forums, everyone would talk about how hard it was to do diptychs, how hard it was or how time consuming it was to kind of manually do this in Photoshop, or like people were even using InDesign to kind of like create these layout diptychs and drag and drop images in and then export those as JPEGs and then resize it in Photoshop. And it was just insane. So I think philosophically, Storyboard kind of solves this huge problem of getting your images on your website as fast as possible, and also kind of as neatly and minimalistic as possible. I know I can definitely speak for myself in this regard. The whole concept of like this wedding blog post that has like 100 collaged crazy images and all different layouts and forms and stuff like that, that to me, that is not a feature that I would want. That's not something that I would look for in a product, because that to me just detracts from the photography.
Yeah.
This is just my personal opinion. I think the photographers that I admire and I follow and I appreciate, they all kind of present their images the same way, and that's in a very simple minimalist format with very minimal image layouts. And you might see these very simple diptychs, just 2 or 3 images put together. I know you touched on that earlier with not wanting to show any more than 3 in a single row, because they get too small and the impact is lost in the resizing. And you see some other products that do these very large multi-image layouts, and Storyboard is definitely not that type of thing. Can you kind of just comment on that?
Yeah. So, I think keeping it simple is the best. Let the images do the talking. Let them, you want to showcase strong images on a blog post. I think that's so always been my philosophy. And like if you start adding, multiple images to like a layout, and you get like 4 images per row, like the photos get so tiny that, they don't have any real impact to me. And if they're, they're not important, or if they're not important enough to be full width images or like just a diptych, then maybe they shouldn't be in the blog post to begin with.
They shouldn't have shown at all, maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. But and I find like if you're doing these crazy layouts too, that takes time. And for me, like I'm being sort of a workflow junkie, I'm all about saving time. And and that's why we started Code and Hustle and why we created Storyboard in the first place, because I really wanted these nice blog layouts, and it was taking me way too long to do them in Photoshop. So I said, there's got to be a better way. So that's how Storyboard came to be. And sorry, I lost my train of thought here. I'm getting distracted by other Hangout things here.
If I could jump in there.
Yeah, sure.
No, it's just the, even with this minimal approach and only showing, so many images, and maybe in an entire blog post, I only show 2 diptychs. I'm still saving a crap ton of time by using Storyboard to do that resizing for me, instead of, manually doing that or using other actions or something that that put that together for me. Like, I have it down to a system. I had it down to a system with the standard storyboard workflow in Photoshop that I could just pound out a blog post so fast. And I didn't think it was possible, but it's now even faster with the designer. As like I'm already going into a blog post with the mindset of, you know, what I want this to look like. I've shot this event. I've shot this portrait session. I know what I want to show. So selecting those images, putting those diptychs together, like you said, like a reaction or like a set of images in a little bit of a sequence, boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that so many of these are going to be singular. I just resize them, click finish, and it's all done for me. It saves me so much time.
Yeah, so that actually brings up a good point too. Like, there's been times where I've used the Storyboard Designer to build my blog posts, even though I didn't have any diptychs in the blog post at all. And Candace just posted a question. Sorry, so slow. Bridge CC shows the title and description correctly, but the alt info doesn't show up in WordPress. I
wonder if that's a plugin issue.
Yeah, so that might be a WordPress issue, Candace, and we can let's touch base about that, and I can have a look and see what's going on there for you. We can do that after the hangout or anytime. Just bug us on Twitter. You know where we're at. But just to get back to talking about, you know, Designer and not just using it to do just image resizing and culling and ordering. So I find Designer is great for, you know, it can be used for anyone, even if you're not doing like diptych or triptych layouts and just all single images per row. It's still really valuable for, you know, tweaking the order, seeing things, you know, how they're going to be on your blog before you build them, to do all the reordering there. Because, like, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to, you know, upload images to WordPress. You know, you preview your draft, and then you have to go and like reorder the images within WordPress.
It's a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, that alone is like, yeah, it's a pain. So
just because you can, you know, put images together in like diptychs and triptychs and collages doesn't mean you should. I mean, you just mentioned using it just as a way to kind of visually sort and see and finish it up that way. The option is there.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, so in culling is like huge, because I think, you know, it all comes down to showing your best images on your blog, and once you see them, how they're laid out in a Designer, like I love to cull there. I usually cull like, you know, 5 to 10 images every time, and sometimes I'll select additional images in, like you say, Lightroom, and export those for the blog, just knowing that I'm going to call them later, like their potentials. Like, I just want to see how they look on the blog.
Right.
But yeah, and you know, obviously, if going back to, you know, creating these crazy layouts that take time to build and lay out, like, I think that's time that could be better spent doing something else. You know, promoting your blog post more effectively, or
networking with other vendors.
Like
generating business.
Yeah. So if you spend, you know, typically spend an hour building your blog post. You know, even in Storyboard doing these advanced layouts, if you could do a simple layout, upload it in, say, you know, 10 minutes, you know, a lot of the time my Storyboard workflow is, you know, 5 to 10 minutes tops, even with SEO, like putting in the SEO descriptions. Right. So you have 45 minutes that you can spend, you know, like networking, or, you know, interacting with clients, following up with clients to help generate print sales. Like, that's, you know, money well saved. Or, you know, just go spend that time with your family. Or, you know, get out shooting, spend the time going shooting, work on a personal project. So yeah, I think that alone should sell, you know, keeping it simple with your blog layouts and not getting too crazy.
Right.
So,
all right. Well, I think that just about wraps up kind of the overview of Storyboard. We're just clocked in there at about 80 minutes. So yeah, there's quite a bit to talk about there. There's quite a bit to show. I think the important thing to note is Storyboard gives you options. You know, with the Designer, that may fit your workflow better. You may really enjoy the standard option in Photoshop with the keyboard commands and that kind of route, or you might want to use the droplet. You know, it's all there, and you can use any one of those options. You know, you could always visit us online at codeandhustle.com. We have a very helpful support site there with some up-to-date knowledge-based articles. And we're always online. We're always here for you to kind of help you along. So please submit any questions, tickets, anything like that at all. We're here to help.
All right.
Anything you want to add there, Sean?
No, I think that was awesome. I think this thing went fairly well. There wasn't too many glitches. Thanks for everyone that watched. And Candace, thanks for your questions.
Oh, in the future, I think, since this kind of went off, we'll maybe do one in the future for our other product, Batch Plus.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I think is really a product that's kind of misunderstood, where it's kind of it can be complex, it can be simple. There's like infinite possibilities with that product. So I think it would be really cool to do another one of these, show off Batch Plus and sort of some of the common scenarios that
where you would use it, why you would use it.
Where you would use it, yeah. So look for another one of these coming in the future. And we also have some ideas of maybe, talking to some other photographers, get them on, have conversations with them via live hangouts, do Q&As with some of your favorite photographers, and get their feedback on what are their workflow tips. So if you want us to interview any photographers that you follow and you're curious about their workflow, let us know in the comments, YouTube comments, send us an email, post us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter, and let us know.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching.
Okay, cheers.
See ya.
Bye-bye.